Go. And let's see if I can get a spotlight on you. And you're under the microscope now, sir.
All right,
It is 8:30, so I don't want to punish the prompt.
let's get after it.
So absolutely. So good morning, everybody. Welcome. Super excited to have Commander Daryle Cardone on with us. Daryle was on last year. We met through Abe Shreve, and Daryle is the commanding officer of the USS Ronald Reagan, which is a Nimitz class aircraft carrier.
Yeah,
So disclaimer, and Daryle will probably say it as well, that anything he says on here is not a reflection or the opinion of the U.S. government or the U.S. Navy. And I'll let him probably even say that better. But I would love to start out just to give the people a quick background of how did you get to where you are today?
yeah. First, thanks for having me on. This is a great pleasure. I grew up in a small blue collar town in northeastern Pennsylvania. Uh, town is named Nanacoke, and father was a teacher and owner of a local pizzeria. My mother was a nurse. And basically I learned my work ethic from my dad and empathy from my mom. Was very interested in sports growing up, which lasted until the moment that I discovered Eddie Van Halen. And then from then uh, had picked up the guitar and decided that music was the path that I was going to go down. And I wanted to be in a band and make records and tour the world. Started studying music in college and finished my bachelor's degree. And at that point, um, I started school very early, and I was 16 when I started my senior year in high school, and I
Wow.
really was just too I felt was immature at that point to kind of make the kind of life decision of what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And so I continued on in a graduate school with the aspiration of teaching music because I liked learning. My father was a teacher. It seemed like a natural fit, but I figured out pretty early on in graduate school that wasn't what I wanted to do. And the only other thing besides being in a band that I wanted to do was be a special agent in the FBI or the Secret Service. And I had reached out to recruiters for each of those organizations. But at the time, at the beginning of the Clinton administration, there was a government hiring freeze. And they both had said, "Hey, we would love to have you on our team. We just can't hire anyone right now." And at that point, I said, "What's the next best thing I can do?" And they said to get a commission in the military. I said, "Wow, like what service?" They said, "Don't care." And I had a number of uncles who my father had served in the military. He was a supply sergeant in the army during the Korean War, and another number of my mother's brothers had served, particularly in the Navy on my mom's side. And I decided at that point I was going to apply to the Navy's Officer Candidate School. And I called and I said, "Hey, good afternoon. My name is Daryle Cardone. I'd like to apply for Officer Candidate School." And they said, "Wow, that's fantastic. What did you study in school?" And I said, "Music." And they said, "Well, we don't need any band majors," and hung up on me. And I figured that Philadelphia was a big recruiting station. I would just wait a few minutes, call back, and I did, and I got a little further the second time, but I could tell the direction we were going to, and I finally just said to the recruiter, like, "Hey, man, if I come down and crush your test, are we still going to be talking about what I majored in?" And the guy paused for a second, and he said, like, "Okay, Nanacoke, like, come on down." And I went down, did pretty well, and then they offered me the opportunity to fly. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, like, would you be interested in flying off an aircraft carrier? To a 23-year-old at that point. I said, like, hell yeah. And, 28 and a half years later, here I am.
That's a background noise side minute. You've landed on aircraft carriers a couple of times, I understand. Like over 700, I think it is.
Yes. Yeah, just over 700 at this point.
Wow. It's something I remember from our last conversation, I think, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you said that you've done that so many times, but you would never, ever, ever do it without running through your checklist.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it is it is just part of the model. And the reason that we get it right so often is that we're very methodical and precise in the way we do that. And it's a business that maybe not more difficult than many others, but certainly less forgiving of error. And
Mm,
the checklists are what get us through that.
interesting. We talk about excuse me, talk about models and systems and checklists with how to, get leverage to grow your business. And it's applicable not only on in the real estate business, but also on landing a plane on an aircraft carrier, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's a really helpful way to radically reduce the number of errors that you find. I mean, surgeons use it, pilots use it, and it's really effective.
Love it. So I have to ask, when we first met, we met through Abe Sharif. So
Mhm.
how did you get exposed to, and I know you're a big Gary Keller fan. How did you get exposed to Gary? And tell me a little bit about how that all came about.
Yeah, so it started through someone had recommended to me, I was a big reader, and someone had recommended the one thing. And I read the book, and it it resonated at a deep level for me, so much so that I read it multiple times. I'd been listening to the podcast as we were talking about before everyone joined. I had attended uh, the goal setting retreat, and started listening to Gary's Think Like a CEO podcast. And through that, one of the episodes that I listened to, the One Thing podcast with Jeff Woods, was an episode that he did with Abe Shreve. And, at the time I was thinking I was leading an organization that was about 150 people, and was going on, to my next assignment, which is the one I'm in now, where I was going to be leading about 5,000. And that really had me thinking hard about systems and processes, and um, how to employ that idea of leverage. And what Abe was talking about in the episode was just the power of a question to unlock
Mm,
the creativity, the engagement of the team. And really, I wanted to build a battle ready organization that I could remain silent while doing it. And to do that, I really
mm,
had to dial in the idea that Gary talks about often, which is about, leadership fundamentally being training, and specifically training other people, how to think, so that they think the right way to do what they need to do to get the results that the organization is looking for. And so, I wrote Abe a note, and knowing Abe, in less than 2 hours, he called me, but he didn't realize that I was in Bahrain at the time, and it was actually the middle of the night. But we ended up having a great conversation, and have been friends ever since.
interesting. Okay. Yeah. And Abe actually has a series going on social media where he and Cody Gibson
Yeah,
are bad time to call kind of thing, which is it is kind of funny.
it is.
So not only did you read the one thing and get involved with Gary's thought process and principles, but tell me a little bit about how you took that to what you're doing today.
Yeah. So, and I mentioned this before we started. It, I really want to make sure that everybody on the call really embraces what you have at Keller Williams, and in terms of training. I have the privilege, like we talked about earlier, of leading a pretty large and diverse organization at this point. But, I do it with a GPS of 411 and, and my one thing planner, which, is never out of arm's reach. Um, and, all of the concepts that the organization relies on and honestly that he talks about in the book, like goal setting to the now. I mean, I ran through an exercise today with two senior members of my leadership team, and we walk through um, it that kind of goal setting to the now exercise where you create line of sight or traceability all the way
Mm,
back to, if we know the end state, like, we want to know, we want the USS Ronald Reagan battle ready by the middle of May when we're going to deploy. How do we need to fill our calendar between now and then to make sure that happens? And, we did a little bit of gap analysis and figured out what our priorities were going to be between here and there, and then gave the team the task of, if I pulled open your planner right now, would I see the priorities that you just mentioned to me? And does every what, because most organizations are really good at the what, right? They can tell you what needs to happen. Where we fall short is the who and the when, right? So everybody's got
mm.
a to-do list. Not a lot of people put that to-do list in their calendar and execute on it.
Wow. Okay. So, which is why Jay was Papazan was extremely intrigued when I let him know. I shared your message to him that you're running the USS Ronald Reagan on a one thing planner. That got Jay's attention. He was pretty interested. Um, so that's just interesting how you've taken the models and the tools that Gary has used and applied them to a Nimitz class aircraft carrier. And something you said that I wanted to ask you about that just
Sure.
got me thinking. You said you wanted to create, in a paraphrasing, the USS Ronald Reagan to be battle ready, and while you remain silent doing it.
Hmm.
Tell me more about that.
Well, our philosophy for how we're going to fight has to survive the combat environment. And you can build an organization where 4,999 other people look at you for what they ought to do every given moment. But that isn't going to last 5 minutes in conflict. And, A, the person would get overwhelmed, and B, if I were a thinking enemy, that'd be the first place I'd aim my first missile. And then after that, the organization will collapse. So, I got after trying to build an organization where I spent the majority of my time teaching people how to think like I was thinking about the problem. So we ended up, ideally with 5,000 people all thinking the same way, and it wouldn't matter which one of us you hit. We would just have, dynamic subordination going on where the next closest person with the right expertise would step up, and the rest of the team would form up behind them and support as required.
Wow. That's amazing. So that kind of brings me to the next question is and we talked about this a little bit last time, but you're leading 5,000 people. Talk to me about how important the role of leadership and what it looks like within an organization and yours in particular or just in general.
Yeah, it's vital, right? Organizations do not survive without leadership. And it doesn't matter if you're an organization of two people or 2 million. The organization will form itself so that certain people are given certain responsibilities and other people form support roles, and it doesn't matter whether those responsibilities are formal or informal. Every group you've ever been a part of has had people who have been the organizer or the leader, or whether that's where you're going to go on, Saturday night, or what you're going to do when you sit down for Monday morning mindset. Um, you are the organization here, and, when people join in. So um, it's critical to any organization. And, to me, leadership is the art of engineering success through and with others.
Love that.
Um, it is an art because it is people based. Um, the goal that you're trying to get after is how to engineer, success, which, Gary and Jay define as getting what you want, and you can't do it alone. If you can, your goals aren't big enough. So it's with and through others. And to me, there's a piece of that that you owe the team as the leader, and that is the vision piece, and that's what I was talking about. Um, when I was saying I need us to be battle ready, and I'd like to be silent while we're doing it. When you talk mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspective, that's the vision piece. That is how I communicated that to the rest of the team. Is my expectation is that you are performing at this level. We are 100% battle ready. And my intention is for you to know how I think so well that I don't have to say a word on game day. Or if the unforgiving day with name your adversary comes, that is not the moment where I need 4,999 other people staring at me because they never thought about what to do before. So, there's a vision piece. And if you don't know what that looks like, right? So picture any given day at Keller Williams. If you as the leader of your team don't know what it looks like when your great agents or all the support personnel or the admin personnel on your team come in and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, but you don't recognize that, you're going to end up with disengagement. If people are showing up and giving you their best art, their best craft when they report in the morning, and you don't know whether they're doing awesome or not, you're not going to continue getting people's best effort. And the corollary is true as well. When you recognize the nuanced way that someone does something, or their particular approach, and you complement that and you encourage the behavior that you want more of, you're going to get that as well. um, but the only way that ever happens if you are engaged and you are present. And I don't just mean physically present, although that's important. I also mean to be where your feet are.
Mm.
And because if you're not, you're going to miss the nuance or the small things that people do that they love when others recognize it. And when you do both of those things well, that typically leads to good results.
Yeah, I heard a couple of things there. One thing you said, and I know it's really interesting. I know it's a Gary Keller thing, but you said that if you're able to succeed alone, your goals aren't big enough.
Hmm.
And Gary's very clear about in the Keller's belief system, the last letter is S for success, results through people. No one, and I mean no one, succeeds alone. And I hadn't heard it put that way, but I love that your goals are not big enough if you're able to do it all by yourself.
Yeah. I mean,
That's awesome.
yeah, personally, it's, if the goal that I'm setting doesn't scare me and make me think I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to make that happen, then I know I'm not thinking big enough.
So that means you have to be living a good portion outside of your comfort zone.
My home address is outside my comfort zone. My ship, if you stood it up on its stern, is about the size of the Empire State Building, or
Really?
we say here in Japan, Tokyo Tower. Picture driving the Empire State Building through the water at uh, you know 30 plus miles an hour, and then have another ship pull up next to that and drive right next to each other 160 feet apart for about 4 hours. It's pretty uncomfortable.
The size of the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
That's insane. Wow. Something we talked about before we got on the call that I wanted to make sure that we touched on. You talked about the importance of time and focus.
Mm.
Tell me how that relates to what you do on a daily basis and how important those things are.
Yeah, so again, this ties back to a lot of what I've learned from Gary. When I hear someone like him say, thinking and being aware at all times of how my time is used is the most important habit of all. And that if you want to do big things, you need a big view of time. When I'm listening to someone who has revolutionized an industry say something like that, like, I tune in and get my pen out. And
Mm.
and you listen to anyone who knows him or spend time with him well, they'll tell you that his superpower is focus. And it's not that he's necessarily disciplined, but he's got some very specific habits. So if you take that time and focus them, and do so repeatedly, you end up with habits of choice in his case that have served him very, very well.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. Um, because time is the most precious resource we have. And it's the only one we can't replenish it. It's I think it also comes back to what you said about being present. I think
Mhm.
if we spend too much time looking through the rearview mirror and looking out the windshield to someday distant and not actually appreciate where we are in the moment, we miss so much. Just
Yeah, totally
that's
agree.
yeah, we really do. We miss so much, and I think it's hard. Excuse me. I know it's hard for a lot of us because we're always thinking ahead. We're always going, and we don't often enough slow down, smell the roses, and actually be present, not only physically but mentally as well. Because you can be present physically, but be mentally miles and miles away. Um, we chatted a little bit about, and I wanted to leave a few minutes at the end for some questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. We talked a little bit about QL, and you shared an older video with me from, and I appreciate that, from Gary from back in Family Reunion. We talked about Quantum Leap. Give me I know that video was very impactful for you. Can you share some of the things from that that really resonated with you?
Yeah, that started with me listening to his Think Like a CEO podcast, where he said the leader's responsibility was to create energy, engage talent, and own results. And when he talked about how to do that, the very first words out of his mouth were mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspectives. And as I heard him say that a number of times, eventually I heard him say, "Well, where I teach this to young people is through Quantum Leap." So immediately I started to look through YouTube, to see if I could find anywhere where he was teaching that, and I came across the video that I had shared with you I'm pretty sure was from 2017,
Yep.
and was just fascinated. The very first book I ever read in my life was Stephen Covey's The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And Gary had said right in there that Covey missed a few and went through his 18 habits. And again, if you find, someone with the level of success that he's had in his life, when he starts talking about the things that he does habitually, like I got my pen out. And
Mm.
hear him going through the, six major areas of life, self, the spiritual, and time, and money, and growth, and the physical area. I just found that so compelling. Um, but again, it was the mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspective part in the beginning. The Navy's got a very clear mission. It's spelled out in the U.S. code, and it's to be prepared to, conduct prompt to sustained uh, combat incident to operations at sea. And we talked about the vision piece, and I learned a lesson, and I told this story in a podcast I did of um, on Abe's podcast, Choose Difficult.
Yep.
I had this day back in music school where I showed up in conducting class and hadn't done the work ahead of time, and I had this music score laid in front of me, and the professor was going to drop the needle on there, and I was supposed to, conduct the piece. But it was very apparent from the time I started that I had no idea what this was supposed to sound like. I mean, I was looking down and I was kind of reading as quickly as I could, but I didn't have that vision in my head. I didn't have it in my ear as to what it was supposed to sound like when I started waving my arms, and I yielded my role at that point as leader of the group and became at best a cheerleader. And
Mm,
like I said, cheerleaders are great, right? Like,
mm,
they could fire you up at a sporting event, but you would never confuse them with the quarterback or the head coach. And that was a huge lesson to me. So when Gary was talking about vision, that really resonated at a deep level. And the Navy's got core values, and all of that just fit together so well for me that my first thought was, I need to get this in the hands of my crew, because I would have, as much as I was benefiting from it in my late 40s, it would have been fantastic if I had seen that when I was 22.
mm, absolutely. So, are you sharing that with the people on the ship, or how it's
I haven't yet. I didn't know whether that was kind of proprietary material
no?
or, uh, or whatnot, but
We'll,
uh,
we'll we'll have to talk offline about that. Maybe we can have a discussion about how we might be able to share that information with you. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, Quantum Loop is a high on my radar for this year. As you just mentioned, I came to KW in 2018, and if I would have been exposed to the information that's in Quantum Leap as a young adult, it would have changed my life. And so that to me is that really touches my heartstrings, which is why I'm planning on teaching it a lot this year. I think it's going to be really a lot of fun. I'm going to take a spotlight off of you, and there you go. You're no longer under the lamp, Daryle. You survived. I wanted to throw it out there for anybody on the call that has some questions. What have you heard? What would you like to know more about? We've got 50 plus people on the call, which is fantastic. Oh, Camille, how come I knew your hand was coming up, girl?
I'm
Fire away,
sure
young lady.
rolling their eyes. I am a Marine Corps veteran, and so this and so a story that actually came up recently with another realtor who happened to be a Marine Corps veteran was we were talking about how in the chow hall in boot camp, you are only allowed to hold your cup with the C of your hand. And we later learned that there's a reason for every little minute detail to include that, which we found out when we were doing drill, which is, movements with weapons and marching and things like that. It was so that we knew exactly how to pull back the charging handle on the rifle. So, and it was uniformed and it was muscle memory. So I wonder, is there anything that the Navy has in similarity to that?
we have a really similar training philosophy in that, our goal is to when we have warfare development centers that work through what they think are the best employment of all our systems, all of our tactics, all of our procedures. And then the mindset is that we practice those so often that our aspiration is not to hope we get it right on game day. It's to practice them to the point where we can't get them wrong. So that as you get stressed and the pucker factor comes in, and you look in that is an adversary vessel that's on the horizon that is malintent and may in fact fire at you, that it is not at that moment that you hope what you did comes back. It's that it is so well ingrained into your muscle memory that you can't help but get it right.
Love
I
that.
love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see Jason, Mr. Manning, another veteran. You're up next, Jason. Fire away.
First of all, I just want to say, number one, it's an absolute honor to be present during your talk today. So I want to thank you so very much for what you have done for this country, what you continually do for this country, and the ability that you allow freedom, not just for America, but for the world. There's a lot of pressure in the job that you're doing. And to be able to do that and still make time to come and speak to us folks here is just absolutely amazing. I'm intrigued by your story and overwhelmed with the ability that I got to hear this morning. So I just wanted to say thank you for your service, and also want to thank Tony for making this happen. This has just set my mind on an amazing track today. So thank you so very much.
Oh,
Thank you,
my
Jason.
pleasure.
Appreciate that. I love it. That's the whole idea of our whole mindset call is to get people thinking. Who else has
Yeah.
got a question? We got one last shot before we get out of here. It's almost 9 o'clock. Mr. Greg Powers, you're going to take us home, sir.
Yes, and yes, thank you for being here. So you talked about making sure that the 4,999 other people think like you. How do you communicate that your vision, your thinking style to those people? What's the most efficient way to communicate it and then repeat it on a regular basis so that it's consistent?
The most efficient, we have a public address system that reaches absolutely everywhere on the ship. The most efficient is for me to just pick up that mic and talk to the entire crew at one time. But I learned very early on a ship like that, you never actually reach anyone. There, since we operate 24/7, there's a good portion of the crew that's sleeping. Being that it's an aircraft carrier, there are a good portion flying or on the flight deck. So repetition becomes key. We have a cascading means of communication through our team that I communicate to our senior leaders who roll that down through the chain of command. And I've also when it's a matter that's of guidance or a matter of importance to me, I've put together a number of what I call CO's grams. Or commanding officers grams, where they're all one page, and as Gary Keller often says, if you want everyone on the same page, you better have one page. So I typically put them out at one time in a one-page format that just communicates on a very specific issue, and then I'll ask the team to cascade that down and repeat it often when it's a matter of importance.
Awesome. Thank you, Daryle. As I said in our pre-chat, going back and forth on text messages, there's no way we're going to cover what we want to cover. 30 minutes is going to be gone quick, and it's already gone. So again, I thank you very much for coming on and taking the time to speak with us. This is as fantastic. I really appreciate it, and thank you for all you do for our country. And we'll talk offline about QL, and maybe we can figure out how we can somehow leverage that for you.
Sounds great.
All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. Go out and make it an amazing Monday.